How long do you have to live out karmic relationships and patterns and situations, especially if you feel like they are killing you inside? So in this episode, I'm going to talk all about how you can heal and clear and transmute your karma now. Hello, welcome back to my podcast. My name is Ariel, and this is Feeling My Feelings, where I finally feel my feelings after years of dissociating from them. And I have in the past really talked more about personal development, helping empaths, highly sensitive people. And I have started to expand a lot more into the spirituality and esoteric realm. And I've been finding that, a lot of spirituality kind of takes personal development and sort of therapy terms and turns it into something that's more connected to the soul, to our greater purpose. And I've been finding it really has started to resonate with me. And one of those things has been the concept of karma and soul contracts. And I think if you are a highly sensitive person or empath and you have been attracted to spirituality, it's probably because there is a point right now where you're starting to see that there is a greater purpose to your empathy and your sensitivity. And that is what I have been starting to step into in the past year. All of us have karma that we are clearing in this lifetime. We have soul contracts to different people, patterns, and situations. And us being sensitive and our whatever's going on with our bodies, that is also part of our karmas. So specifically as a highly sensitive or empathic person, what is our purpose and what is the karma we need to clear? And also, how do we get rid of the karma now and not have to spend forever living in these drawn out patterns that, make us feel like we're suffering? Well, let's get into it, y'all. So what is karma? What are soul contracts? And what does that have to do with our purpose in this life? So in spirituality, a lot of people believe that our souls chose the life and the patterns and the karma and the people, the relationships in this life for a reason. And that's to learn a lesson for their soul's karma. And it's to ultimately live out a purpose that will help humanity. And as this goes into the idea of reincarnation, but essentially we think that our souls live out a couple of different lifetimes, and we may play out different levels of karma, different things, different issues. We may have different themes. We may carry those over into different newer lifetimes. And essentially, your soul itself has karma that it wants to continue healing and clearing until it's basically complete. And it brings it back to, it has a role. All of us have a role. All of our souls have a role in elevating humanity and the world's consciousness. So ultimately, what I'm saying is there is a purpose to our suffering, and our souls kind of signed up for it. So we chose the families we were born into. Sometimes we even choose some of our most significant relationships and when we're going to meet them, and our most significant, moments in our lives, because some things were put intentionally so that we could grow and bring something into the world. But that also means that we have to accept that our souls may have signed up for the uncomfortable, abusive relationships that we've had. It may have signed up to suffer, it might have signed up for our bodies to suffer through health issues. It might have signed up for, for very difficult situations. And that part of our soul contract and the karma is really hard for us to accept, even if our souls kind of like decided to do it, because it's basically saying we signed up to suffer. And what I will say about that is that whether or not it was fated to suffer, I don't think that that's actually a question, or like we don't need an answer to whether or not it was meant to be that we suffered. However, that idea is nice to put into perspective. What's more important is, what are we going to use that for? So that's, to me, the concept of karma. What are you going to do with the hard lessons and the resistance that you're facing in the relationships and the patterns that keep happening in your life? And for me, yeah, I think karma, and the karma that we chose, the lessons we chose, the hardships that we chose in this life, is to build us into a more empowered, wise person that helps the rest of humanity. I don't think that we're just meant to suffer. I think many of us think that our soul contract, our fate, is to suffer and to end it there. I will say there may be some people who have more binding soul contracts than others. Some people have more free will to be aware of their issues and to be able to change them and transmute them and to heal them. Some people may end up in unfortunate situations where they do just end up being a victim or settle into a certain type of lifestyle. However, I will say, if you are watching this video, if you are into spirituality, if you are open to the idea of karma and contracts and clearing them in the first place, that to me means that you are open enough to have free will to change it. So yeah, that's probably a little intense, but that is karma. Yay, karma. It's not bad. You'll be fine. Especially if you're aware of it. Now, how do we not suffer? How do we stop having so much karma? A way I like to think about karma and our soul contract and our personal hero's journey is through really story and knowing that we are kind of the chosen ones for whatever our life's purpose is. We're all Harry Potter. We're all chosen for a reason to live out whatever suffering, whatever trials and tribulations that we are living out in this life. We were meant to be empowered. We were chosen, just like Harry, to live it out and to defeat the evil, or to clear the karma, really, to clear the old ways of being in order to bring about new. So, with that said, still sucks. I understand. It still sucks to be like, I'm in the midst of, really hard times, and keep going. Here is what I believe my soul contract and my karma to be in this lifetime that's leading to my purpose. So for me, it actually starts with my health and from how I was born. So I recently found out that I am neurodivergent, and I also have Ehlers-Danlos, which is just like extreme hypermobility. And I think that also makes me more sensitive in a lot of ways. And it also makes me a lot more emotionally reactive to things. And I've joked about this before, but I seriously think it means that my body is made to be honest, and it does not have the grounding or the ability to mask or pretend when something doesn't feel right for too long. And for me, and I think a lot of us are starting to realize we're neurodivergent or highly sensitive or even have hypermobility, and it's become kind of like a buzzword or too trendy to be like neurodivergent online or whatever. But I seriously think, okay, yes, it's trendy, but there's a purpose to it. I think that a lot of us are awakening to the fact that our brain chemistry cannot hold pretending. It can't hold like doing anything that it doesn't want to do. and it does not have the ability to literally think in a like it literally doesn't have the ability to conform. Isn't that insane? Like, because when we're saying we were neurodivergent, you were born divergent. You were born to think differently. I've never read or watched the Divergent series, but I feel like that might have been really applicable here. But anyway, I I think that that's insane, and the fact that a lot more people are thinking that and then kind of stopping at the fact that it's a struggle, it is. Let's take it from, oh, it's a struggle, I have been alienated, I feel different, to why should I have this struggle? Why do I need to be so sensitive? Like, what could I use this for? I think a lot of us are awakening to the fact that we're neurodivergent, and for me, basically body divergent hypermobile, because we're supposed to think differently to help the world think differently. And I found that, you know, I grew up in a very traditional sort of Asian family dynamic. And I think for a while I was able to, for as much as I could, like, and I was not trying to be rebellious or anything, even though I'm an Aquarius, but I was always, hardworking. I was always really responsible, cleaning after myself or whatever. And I tried to do all of the normal things, but when it came down to it, my body was still so sensitive that it could not hold pretending for too long. Like, if something bothered me, I would always react. I'd always be upset. And yes, as I matured, I started to rebalance that and to learn different tools to handle it. But I also think that that was important for me to do, because if I had been okay and able to always mask myself, then I would have allowed the typical patterns of shutting down my voice and not being myself to play out. So there was a reason why my health and my sensitivity had to happen. And I found that this ended up happening throughout my life, like in friend groups, as I got older. Seriously, every workplace that I had straight out of college, I would end up being a really odd, sensitive person. But if there was a toxic work environment, somehow I would always react to the point where the environment had to face what was happening. And especially also when I was dating or in romantic relationships, yes, I ended up playing the role of an empath that always felt like the therapist to a narcissistic person. But also at the same time, I had the ability to see and maybe be too empathic to the narcissistic person and help them change. And even though that feels really martyry and sacrificial of me, it felt like it kind of sucked. There was a point where I stopped, in the example of dating, where I realized, okay, I have the ability to take a narcissist and understand it. I think I joked about this before. Did I use the term Narcissist Whisperer before? I think I've at least said it in my head and it's been hilarious, but I think it's actually real for me. I have the ability to be strong enough to be this sympathetic to people who have, honestly, I even don't want to use the term narcissist because that's too trendy and that's too overdone. But let's say controlling people who are overbearing or domineering and don't see that they are being toxic. I have the ability, because I grew up around that a lot, to empathize with them and to see a certain side of them. And in relationships, unfortunately, I have always helped them sort of become a person with a little bit more integrity. Now, it exhausts me. It's not healthy to me, but I will say, and I think this is just what happens a lot. Unfortunately, if you are empathic or a woman in a heterosexual relationship, it ends up being that you feel drained, but your empathy helps the sort of toxic behavior of another person. And that's what happens. So I look back at most of the people that I've dated and I see that I've had an effect on them, and I have lessened, or at least I've affected them in some ways to my fucking martyrdom and sacrifice, but like I have helped them in some way. And the thing is for me, because I tend to attract and be attracted to like really ambitious people who do have a sense of purpose and stuff. And I think that me being able to do that with, I'm going to say narcissist again because there's no other word for it right now, but like me being able to do that with narcissistic people who have power, or who have not like in terms of relationships, not really have power, but narcissistic people who have like influence or a greater purpose, like I think that that was important for me to do. Now, how do we not stay that person though? Like, don't you kind of, now that I've set that back, doesn't that sound like a shitty role or like a shitty like thing to play out as your karma? Like, oh, I am here to observe other overbearing people and to sort of like martyr myself to try to help them. I know, I hate it. I've hated it for a while now. But I think that I found that, as an empath, as a sensitive person, there was a point where, there has been a time period where I sat in this and I thought, I don't think the empathy is for nothing. I don't think that I'm being empathic or sensitive or helping other people for no reason, but it still doesn't get me anywhere. And I sat in the sort of victimhood of that for a while. And I sat in the sort of like, oh, I feel powerless. This is all I'm going to be. Someone's always going to overpower me. And I think there was a time period where I had to be so triggered and feel so much like a victim, where there was no choice but to find out how to survive and empower myself. So as a sensitive person who is empathic to other people and feels overpowered by them, even though they're helping them, and as a person with health issues kind of as a result, or worsened health issues, I obviously went through periods of time where I was like, I'm just a victim. I have no power. Like, what is this? This is my life. There's nothing else I can do. So specifically, I'm talking to highly sensitive people and empaths, but this goes for everyone. If you are in victim mentality, and if you don't know how to get out of that, that is the karma that you need to clear. I don't think that our fate, that especially if you are someone who is finding they're actually helping other people as well, like, I don't think our fate is to stay victimized or to stay small. It's actually part of your karmic contract to grow into your power. It's actually part of your lessons in this life to transmute everything you've learned, especially with the wisdom. Honestly, the wisdom and the power of an empathic person. Once that type of person gains their power, they can actually help transmute the world and the current unhealthy toxic patterns that it is playing out right now. Like, yeah, on the level of life and humanity that I'm serving at the moment, it's random people that I've been dating or places I used to work at, like, and toxic behaviors and environments. Cool. Like, in my immediate life, I have helped that. But on the bigger scale, we're also going to be able to help like systems, political stuff, like ways, like how does that translate to the message that we bring out to the world, and how is that going to help other people who are facing other things with like even bigger systems and, like the government and higher powers that are acting out these unhealthy patterns. I think it's important that more of us, more of the empaths and sensitive people in the world that learn to be empathic within their immediate communities, it's important for us to learn how to, this is why it's important that we have social media now. It's important for us to voice out more and to spread sort of the wisdom and the life lessons that we've learned as empathic people. So how do we clear the karma? Well, I think what happens is we have to hit an awareness point. Like, there is a point where we go from sitting in a regular pattern and thinking that that's okay, and that, oh, I just always have to play this role. I always have to play small. And there's a point where we do get upset. We do continue to get aggravated and feel resentful that we're playing small. And it's awareness, and it feels like suffering, and it feels like I hate my life and whatever's happening. But that resistance, that anger and resentment is actually getting you to the awareness point. Whatever is pissing you off is actually pointing you to whatever you want to basically transmute and heal. Like for me, I think I had a point where I was always pissed off at, people being manipulative, people shutting down other people's voices, people domineering each other. Like that has always pissed me off. And a lot of the times I felt trapped in that, but there was something about it where I could not conform. I could not let myself believe that that was okay. And that anger, that resentment was what pointed me to, oh, I'm a person with awareness now. And when you now get into awareness, you have the ability to start transmuting, to start realizing things, and to start changing it. So if you're angry, if you have now seen the issues within the environments and stuff that you're in, actually, you are becoming aware. Come on, use it as a silver lining. It's okay. I know it's hard, but it's actually helping you open your eyes to the bigger picture of what needs to happen. So let's think about and become more aware of the karma. What are some patterns that keep playing out for you? Is it, I always attract this type of romantic relationship because that is how my parents were? Or is it, I am always, stuck in these sorts of situations because this is the worth that I felt like I had when I was younger because my environment told me so? Whatever it is, what is the pattern that you keep seeing? Why don't we, pinpoint times in our lives when that pattern has happened? And also pinpoint times in our lives where we were able to rise above that pattern. I will say the pattern will keep looping until you become aware, and until you become aware of your free will to change the situation. This is a really interesting question that I actually posed to some of the people in my certification group, my spiritual coaching group. And it is, do we have the free will to break karma, or do some things have to be fated and have to happen in a timely manner? And basically they agreed with what I'm kind of saying right now. And it's, once you become aware, then you turn on the free will. Now, how long will that awareness take you? I think, again, if you're watching this video, if you're becoming more aware of karma and everything like that, I think you're now on your way, but when you're in the midst of it, like you're in the throes of it, you're going through it. But once you kind of are able to step back and kind of that light bulb happens and you're like, wait, this shouldn't happen, whatever. That's when the free will can start being turned on. That's when, and whatever is going on, you have the ability to influence it, to change it, to approach it differently. Okay. So now that you're aware, you're able to separate yourself from the old pattern. Start to separate yourself from, first of all, the victim mindset, the survival mindset, basically what I'm going to call the lower vibration mindset that's kept you small. Start to unravel and separate that. So I think it's important to kind of practice, like, what sort of belief systems no longer serve me in this situation? What is keeping me small? What do I no longer want to play out? What beliefs do I no longer want to play out? For me, for example, it's like I don't want to play out the idea that I have to be small or that my voice has to be small. So, and the thing is, I've definitely seen examples. So think of examples of people who have broken that pattern before. I think a lot of different content creators, most people who are creative at all, which is what I want to create more. Like, most people who are like that have had to break the sort of like, the insecurities around sharing their voice. So I've seen it playing out multiple times that people can break that pattern. So if it's possible for them, it's possible for you. Like, and I've seen people kind of struggling with a lot of survival mindset, or like their confidence, or like, even their money, or are they allowed to live out their purpose? And, most of the people that I have been around that have hit really insane success that does change and transform other people's lives, they usually have hit a rock bottom point where they had to kill their ego. They had to kill all of the other patterns, all the other stories that they told themselves, all the other masks and ways that they defined themselves that kept them small. They actually had to kill that. And at some point, it may have felt like abandonment. It may have felt like for example, I'm doing a certification program with Higher Self Institute and headed by Sahara Rose. And she always talks about how her breaking points were actually kind of the igniting points for her newer paradigm, her newer life, and for her purpose. Like, she was disowned by her family, she was cheated on by her husband, and now she's created this school that helps other people empower themselves. She has made a podcast, has made like spiritual related like pop music, like, and what she had to do was, unfortunately, I know this is a strong way of phrasing it, but kill the old version or the old story, the old limiting beliefs that she had about herself. So it's a huge step, but as you become aware, start to separate and to sort of like challenge the limiting beliefs that are keeping you small. So it can be hard to actually sever ties in active relationships or patterns. And I think it's hard because oftentimes we have to be in these situations to survive for some reason. Or sometimes, for example, it's like, oh, it's a toxic family member or something that, you're going to be tied to in some ways, or at least you think you are for the rest of your life. Or I have to stay here or there because I need money. Or, I think that you are still able to cut ties even if you are still physically tied to whatever the karmic situation is in your life. I think that's also where you start transmuting. Okay. So as you become more aware and you start challenging the limiting beliefs, that's a lot of stuff for yourself, for you internally to sort of change. How does that translate to in the physical, like with the actual karmic people and situations in your life? Sometimes we can't get out of them right away, but the internal change is going to make a huge difference. And I think the way that we bring that more out into, and sort of ground it is doing grounding exercises, doing sort of cord cutting exercises. If you are able to spend more time to recharge yourself and to get out of those environments, do it. Like, it's going to be hard because I think a lot of us fall into a pattern, especially if it's like people we're dating or whatever, like where we go back and forth between, oh, I want to go back to that karmic pattern and that's not good for me. And we might be in this cycle, in this loop over and over again until we do something that actually changes the habit and changes our thinking and our beliefs. So what's interesting is I found that no matter how much, although this is an important step, no matter how much we have changed our limiting beliefs and we've become aware of all the wrong things that we're doing and all the bad patterns and all the ways we don't want to be acting, as aware as we get, we have to now make our bodies believe it. We kind of have to recondition our bodies and our nervous systems to allow in something different. So what's really important to do is sort of embodiment and grounding exercises and just rewiring our nervous systems as much as we can. So first of all, that's, can we get out of that environment So, or can we change our reactions? If you are so dysregulated at a certain point, like I know I have been, like sometimes that requires some people turn to antidepressants or different changes in their diet or something that rewires their brain, maybe more meditation, yoga, doing stuff for your body so that your body starts to get reconditioned and to believe that it's safe enough for something new. Your body needs to know it as well. So that's a lot of literally taking back your own energy. Creating and recharging your own energy is really important, because no matter how much you're aware of it in your head, if it doesn't translate to your body, it'll just kind of like come back to your head and make you question yourself again. So if that's, now it's going to be hard, but if that's like, for example, like something like a romantic partner, it's time to, let go of them and to start working on recharging your own body and yourself as much as you can. Also, it's important to step into new environments. I think that this can be hard if you're really focusing on you first. I know that I kind of get stuck with that because I need to do a lot of sort of internal work sometimes, and I get stuck there. But I'm starting to step more into being in healthier environments. So start exposing yourself to healthier people and ways of being. And I feel like in terms of karma, like basically you may have a relationship that you may not be able to entirely sever. Like, for example, if it's family, and usually that's always the first one, right? If it's family, they were the base of what caused your trauma in the first place, but they were also the base of what your purpose was. So every time you kind of come back to them, whether it's like a holiday or whatever time you meet up with them and it's the same old pattern that plays out, maybe take a step back and realize, first of all, if you get re-triggered in the same way, I know I do, notice how much they are still the same. And if you go back and you're kind of like, wait, but I've done so much growth, like I've done so much, like I show up differently in other spaces and environments, and I've grown a lot personally, then that means that you grew and they didn't. And that's really important to be aware of. It's okay. So spiritually, I think all of this is spiritual when I talk about, but you also can do some rituals or symbolic things to let go. So a lot of people do cord cutting ceremonies. So that's literally just find some sort of cord and, kind of say a mantra or like speak it into the universe and say, I no longer want to play out this pattern. And then like literally cut the cord and visualize that cord being cut, and always do that like every time you feel like you need to step back in to a toxic like environment or relationship or something. Just remember that tie is no longer there anymore. I feel like at this point I'm really just saying start to heal yourself, but that's part of it. That is part of what karma is. You're gonna start with the hard lessons, the resistance, and the suffering, but you have to realize the free will and actually how necessary it is for you to actually take back your power in this. So I think the part of karma that really not a lot of people understand is the fact that the fate is not that you still stay suffering. Your karmic contract is usually not that, like if you're aware of it, it's probably usually not that you will suffer forever and die and fail. Like, I think the point is, if you've become aware of it, you're supposed to transmute it and heal it. Now, I will say that a lot of us, unfortunately, may have contracts where, or they may see, there are some people with unfair or life circumstances. And in those situations, I've also found that, some people have learned acceptance in those situations. And it's kind of this knowing. And if you find that in some situations, they're just not doable, I think, so this gets very spiritual again, tap into, speak to your higher self. What is the bigger purpose? Like ask your higher self, what is the bigger purpose of this? What can I do with this heavy level of suffering? I know that that's hard to do, especially when you're in the throes of heavy survival. But I found that, now this is getting kind of deep and sad, but I found that people, you know, who have, for example, unfortunately passed because of cancer, like their sort of last messages, or like their, whatever their, their legacy in their life was, they're able to spread their message and stuff out to the world. So in those types of situations, we need to make sure that, again, that person, their power is that their message still lives on. There's always going to be a power. Like there's always going to be some sort of necessary purpose that someone holds, even if it doesn't feel like it. Like it's, and if you have the ability to change some things, especially now, okay, I'm not going to, I hope you don't feel like I'm minimizing whatever, like depending on like what your karma is. But for me, for example, I know that a lot of my issues, now it turns into health issues. So there's that, but a lot of my issues are sort of like voice, like confidence sort of things. But, I feel like that is not as dire as, for example, if I was dealing with like a more pressing like health issue. I don't know. But anyway, when we have shed a lot of our limiting beliefs, and if we're starting to shed our karmic patterns and relationships, it's going to feel like we're quote unquote dying. And this is what me and I think a lot of the people in my certification program are currently going through, because when you are having to level up and step into your purpose, it feels like you do have to let go of old ways of being, and the amount of time that you're spending with people who may no longer serve the new energy that you want to have. Like it's gonna feel like the old ways of being no longer serve you, and you feel like that part of you is starting to shed in order to bring in something new. And that actually feels like an overall grieving process. Like I know for me, I was having trouble for a while, like letting go of the idea of the relationship I wanted to have with my family. And for, I think, the past year or more, I would be telling therapists that I have like I feel like I'm having a hard time letting go. And I think that there was a point where I finally reached, I was at anger and resentment and sadness over and over again. And then there was a part where I kind of reached the fact that like this idea of what I wanted it to be, the expectation of the relationship that I want to have, is kind of like, I phrased it in a really interesting way. I kind of thought this dynamic is how we're going to die with this dynamic. Now, that's a really strong way of putting it, but I basically was telling myself, and it kind of hit on the fact that like, I need to kill the expectation and the idea of what I wanted something to be. And at the point where I realized that, I started to accept it and to fully grieve and mourn and let it go. So also, I know in a grief process, like the cycle keeps coming around. So sometimes you'll keep going back and forth to that. So again, that's whether it's, expectations or relationships of like how you wanted your family relationship to be, or, this happens a lot with romantic relationships. Like you keep coming back thinking like this can improve. Sometimes it can, but if you're aware of that, if you're at a point, now I have a friend that's going through this right now. If you're at a point where you're constantly going back to a certain relationship, but you're aware of the pattern, that is the point where you get to choose and decide, do I use my free will to sort of elevate this and to grow separately, or do I choose to play back into the pattern? Sometimes I will say, I don't think that staying with a certain pattern necessarily is wrong, depending on how much you think you want to learn. So for example, I feel like for me, like I moved back in with my family and I kept playing out this sort of like, I feel small sort of karma. And it took me a while to get out of it. And I had my cousins, I had other people telling me, like, you have to move out, you have to separate yourself from that because you will never grow. Yes, but I also think part of my karma was to sort of sit in and really observe and unearth a lot of the issues that I was not facing. Like, and here's the thing, had I not stayed and like lived with my family and like and interacted with that karma, that would still hit me with other groups of people. And it did. Like, whenever I was not with my family, I was playing out that same dynamic with the like toxic work environments that I had. Like, when I was not living at home, I still had similar patterns happen in other workplaces I was having, like I had. So there's also kind of, and you might find that when you're dating people, you're like, I'm dating the same sort of person, aren't I? And sometimes it's like, it's a little bit better, you know? They're like you're kind of like, oh, they're like less abusive, but they are still kind of. And I found that like, even if you switch situations or patterns or environments, that same sort of karma, that same lesson's still going to pop up with other people, because it needs to be something that we look at, that we're able to face, that we're able to have enough free will to go, I think I now have to heal that pattern in me, as opposed to, you know, allowing myself to think that new environments will just change it for me. So you do need to step into healthier environments and choose them, but the only way you're going to recognize that is if you create different belief systems and you create that awareness around your patterns first. So, for example, if you are like the friend that I have right now who's going through this, like, and you keep going back and forth, like going back to this toxic person you're dating, and then you're like, oh no, I need to cut off ties and I need to work on myself. Like, I've had that happen. I on and off still kind of do that. But I've realized that I'm not going to, at the very least, overemphasize the need for the relationship. Yes, it may come back and forth, but the point is that I'm always looking at and learning from it. So in the times that I've had this happen, you know, where I've dated somebody, I felt a huge tie to them. There was a point where I think I needed that person to trigger me. I know that sucks. I hate saying that. But there are certain times, again, we choose our karmic lessons in our lives because they're meant to make us, to actually awaken the anger, the resentments, the trigger points, so we can become aware of our power, right? So there was a point where that happened with somebody I was dating, and then I could only put so much into it for so long until I realized I have to go work on myself. And then I'd work on myself. I feel like I'd level up. I'd go back to that person, and then I'd be like, oh, this is kind of better. And I'd realize that we were both kind of like, oh, we're healthier. Cool. And then something happens and it still triggers me, and then I have to leave them again. And if I were to date another person, and I did, you know, they would also trigger something in me. And so here's the thing. I think our free will allows us to either play out our karma by constantly being triggered by other people, which is like forcing us in a harsh way to level up and be healthier, or we get to choose to just kind of do that we get to do that independently of other people. I think we actually have a choice. So, and sometimes, especially now, okay, I will say, you might not have as much of a choice or be so aware of a choice if you are so locked in to a certain trauma pattern that you have. So there are some people who are very people oriented, who are very, you know, like you could say codependent or clingy or whatever, but some people also learn better with other people. So if you fall into that pattern, but you also find that your strength, your talents is in helping others, and you love being around other people and that energizes you, then maybe you do need other people to help you play out that pattern. But if you're like someone like me and you feel like I think a lot of my growth happens when I look within and when I'm introspective, then, take that and go with it. So I think a good practice is also just knowing, like, whenever you come up to resistance, or you're angry or you're resentful, like, what are the sort of strengths? What are the things that you are seeing that other people aren't seeing? Like, what are the things, especially as an empath or a sensitive person, like, that you're always bringing into a situation that no one else seems to be seeing? Because for me, that's always been, again, the empathy part. It's the introspective part. Like, if my strength is, and this has always been my strength, I am able to see a hard situation, look within, and find the deeper reason or the purpose. And my strength is actually, like, I think my strength is actually transmuting karma. And I think that's what maybe a lot of empaths' strengths are if they look really closely at it. But I just feel like, for me, if I am always able to look within and find the answers, then I gotta recognize that as a really strong skill and something that I can use even further down the line. So another thing that I like doing is, I like creating podcasts, and I'd like to go back to writing. Like, I like thinking of big ideas and concepts. And so ultimately that's just going to fuel my purpose. So when we've had these karmic patterns for so long, we will inevitably learn something from it. We'll probably learn something about ourselves, but we'll also learn that we've probably stumbled upon some things that other people don't know how to deal with. And of course, that's going to create, our suffering creates our sort of purpose. And I know that sucks, but I think the point is, we can't sit and think that we are stuck as if there is no purpose in it. I think that's where most people get tripped up. It's that they think their karma, I keep saying this, they think their karma and their fate is to just fail. That's usually, if you're aware of it, the end point. That's where your old self dies, and that's where the new stuff begins. So, and that's usually how most people's contracts operate. That's usually how they work. I feel like I'm at this stage, and that's integration. And it's hard, but it is okay. And I feel like if you have gone through so many stages and so many patterns and stuff, and you're finally at a point where you're like, I feel super wise now. And I actually feel like, for me, I hit a point where all of the victim mindset and stuff started to die down. And I've just been kind of chilling by myself. And I realized that, I didn't know what it was like to sort of live in my power. And what's interesting is, you could be going through so much karma and so much, becoming so wise and stuff. And when there is a point when there are healthier people, when there's healthier environments, when you have the ability to act within your power and to not play small, it might be like, oh, I don't know how to do that though. And this is kind of what I have been finding, integrating what I've learned and actually building the new, empowered self. It's also not instant. It's still sort of constantly regulating your nervous system, but also reconditioning yourself, making it normal to live in your purpose. It's actually an interesting adjustment to make it normal to live in your purpose as opposed to living small. So the part of our contracts where we went through all the suffering, again, that's not the end of your contract. That's a huge part of your contract, but the other part of your contract is, you have to fulfill the rest of your contract, essentially. You get to the turning point where you're like, I need to live out and create based on whatever I learned. For a lot of us, we may be called to being creators, I know I am, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that you're like, oh, I'm going to become a speaker and a life-changing coach or whatever. Sometimes that just means Like, I'm going to take what I learned and change whatever sector of the world that I'm serving. I will say that I think that humanity's actual karma is that we are learning how to use free will. We are learning how to use our power and how to choose power and thriving and living morally and with integrity, as opposed to falling into toxic patterns. So, as someone who seems like they're probably becoming more aware of that, I think it's awesome because you and I and a lot of us who are becoming more awakened are on the side of humanity that's actually ushering in the higher consciousness. And I don't want to continue playing out the other toxic parts. This is humanity's karma. Do you want to be on the side of it that's actually helping others evolve? Or do you want to be on the side of it that makes it harder for others to evolve? That's our free will. So right now, what is the resistance going on in your life? And what do you feel like it's calling you to transmute and to change? Give yourself some grace and take this at your pace, but whatever you're going through, keep moving through it because it's going to lead to your purpose. And it's also going to be purposeful. It's going to help other people.